Unity behaves a little bit differently than a lot of software that you might be used to, and it's important to note the differences. For one, a Unity project isn't a single file. A Unity project, unlike, say, Photoshop or a .psd file that Photoshop saves where all of its different layers and things are stored, in Unity, everything is stored as subfiles. So each Unity project is really just a folder. I say it's a folder, and inside of the folder is everything that your project needs. The assets folder is where most of this actually affects us as developers on a day-to-day basis, and one type of asset in particular, the Unity scene. A Unity scene, which is a .unity file, is what you're editing and what you're opening when you open Unity, and you can only have one scene open at a time. So if I make a new scene, here it's untitled, hit save, scenes, new scene. We'll make a cube so we can so it'll look different than the other empty scene. So here's my new scene. I made a cube. I hit Control S. I have saved that new scene. If I go to sample scene just by double clicking on it, I am no longer in that one Unity file. I'm now editing a different file, and I can make a different cube and put it somewhere else, and so on, going back and forth. So my Unity project is this folder that has all these subfolders, and I'm going to go through them really briefly in a moment. And inside of that, we have, among many other assets and many other things that your project will be using, sprites, images, sounds, 3D models, all that stuff, are .unity scene files. And when you open Unity, for the most part, you're opening one scene file. That's not always true. You could be editing a prefab instance. You could be editing an animation. You can be editing, the Unity editor can edit more than just scenes. But most of the time when you think of being in Unity, working and making changes, you're thinking about, changing game objects, adding components, and moving things around a scene, and that is editing the one scene file. The Unity project is greater than that one file, so the Unity editor is only ever showing you a bit of your project at a time. And that can be kind of confusing to work with, but once you start using Unity, you're going to realize it actually makes a lot of sense. So what other folders besides the assets folder, which is all your stuff and your scenes, what other folders are there? There is library. Library is a folder generated by the Unity editor specific to your computer, and you can totally delete it. That's a lie. Don't do that. Don't just go deleting things. But this library folder will not affect your project. Your project will affect this library folder. So it is generated as a sort of a database behind the scenes that the Unity editor needs to run. It needs it to do things, but it'll create it itself. So if you're backing up and archiving your projects, you can delete the library folder in order to save space. But if you're working on a project, definitely don't delete it. If you delete it, you will, one, definitely need to relaunch the editor. That's important. Things will start breaking and crashing if you don't. And when you relaunch it, it's going to regenerate the library folder. And for large projects, this could take, I've had it take like 40 minutes for really big projects with really big assets. So usually just a couple minutes or just a couple seconds, depending on your project. But if you're actively working on it, don't just go deleting things. But I will delete the library folder before archiving it or uploading it somewhere or sending it to somebody else. Logs is a folder that just contains, here's the different packages, and here when you update them, it'll note that. So you basically should be able to ignore this folder. If you don't have to ignore this folder, it means you're investigating what went wrong, and I'm sorry, because that stinks. But good thing it's there to help you investigate. Packages. If you don't know what packages are, check out the other section on them, but instead of storing all of the information for all the code for the editor to run each plugin, Unity just stores one JSON file that says, here's the package, here's the version, the specific version of it, and it stores this in this manifest.json file that is unique to your project. So as I switch between different projects that are using different packages and different versions of things, Unity handles all that. You don't need to update, I update the editor on my computer. I'm not changing as I go from one project to another, I always have the right version of the editor and the right version of the packages in the editor. Unity makes sure of that. because you don't want to update things while you're working on a project. Project settings is another actual files that are actually saved. Let's take a look at physics 2D settings. And we can see, you got, gravity is negative 9.8. Sounds familiar. It is just when you edit your project settings, gravity negative 9.8, it's where all that gets saved in those files. So that's important. You definitely want to bring that with you. I've had friends send me Unity projects, but they only sent me the assets folder. And the bug and the problem they were having that they wanted me to take a look at and help them with was in their project settings, and I wasn't able to help them because they didn't give me that part. So you want to keep that with you. That's part of your Unity project, of course. Temp, temporary working background garbage, blah, blah, blah data that you should never look at or edit. The only thing you need to know about temp is if you're inside of a OneDrive or you're inside of a Dropbox or you're inside of something else, synchronizing or backing up or looking at your data all the time, you're going to want to tell it to ignore the temp folder because that can cause some errors. And then lastly, we have a solution, a C# solution file. This is used by your code editor to figure things out. You can edit and work on a Unity project without ever even opening Unity, just by editing, adding, or working on files in the assets folder. In fact, in the assets menu, you have an import new asset. All that will do is copy the file into your assets folder. That's all it does. Neat. One last thing I guess I really quickly should mention is the .meta files. That's how Unity keeps track of if you've changed something, and it keeps track of what its identifier is in the behind the scenes database that it's using to do all its blah, 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 blah Unity editor stuff. Don't delete those. Stop deleting those. Who's deleting those? Don't do that. They're important. We need those. Unity needs those. Those can get moved around and should be moved around when you use source control or send someone the file or the project, because trying to go back and forth can mess you up. That's kind of everything. That's a little bit more than everything you need to know about Unity projects and Unity scenes.